So this is a question from Christian Sabido on the discussion forums, who asks, so after all the poems earlier in the course where the literal reading was bypassed in favor of a meta reading, so reading each poem as a meta poem, why haven't we read the Death of a Toad as a meta poem?
All right. Well, should I try a snarky answer to that question? I mean, would anybody be annoyed by a snarky answer? Because it's not a meta poem. It's a poem it's a satire of a suburban guy running over a toad. I mean, it's possibly a meta poem insofar as Richard Wilbur is showing us his extraordinary talents as an inventor of a form and his amazing ability to choose words and rhyme them. So maybe that's meta-poetic in that he's showing off in a way that's not that alien from, Gertrude Stein showing off. There's a certain virtuosity. But what do you think, Julia Block? You think I'm right. It's not really a meta poem.
I think, well, I mean, Kristen makes a good point that it's over the top, it's exaggerated. So isn't the form kind of making the point that the content is making, which is that the death of a toad is something only to be spoken about in an exaggerated way and over dramatized way. So I can see the point, but I think I'm with you that there's not a meta quality to the form of the poem itself.
I mean, all poetry is aware of itself as a formal thing, because when you reach the end of a poetic line, you decide to, push the return button. That consciousness is different from prose, which just rolls over the next line, and when they publish it, they decide where the line ends. Mm-hmm. And that in itself, I suppose, creates the kind of self-consciousness that rises to the level barely of being metapoetic. In that sense, all poetry is metapoetic. But I think we've been using metapoetry in a narrower sense. When a poem is partly about the poem itself, it's a metapoem. So many of Dickinson's poems, maybe all of them, are metapoetic because they're all interpretable as being about the act that's happening as she writes it. And you don't have that sense there. I don't know. I have to just say that this thing that's been sitting here, it's been sitting here like this. I think Chris Martin has this frog. It's not a toad, it's a frog. But tonight, when I arrived, it was there like this. Zach, can you get that? There it is. I don't know if we're seeing. There it is.
We're seeing it.
Long live the toad. Any thoughts before we go to the phone call? Any thoughts on Death of a Toad, Dave Poplar? And then I'd like to go to Max or Allie after that.
I could just take a quick stab at a metapoetic reading and say that it celebrates the artificiality. In a sense, it seems like he's talking about the artificiality of being in suburbia and making that grandiose.
Yeah.
And that's why the poem itself is so grandiose, just like the grandiosity of suburbia.
Mock heroic, which is a critique of suburbia. And Wilbur was, though, in this case and later, poetically conservative, sorry to use that term, but not an experimenter in the way that the modernists were, but a political liberal, for what that's worth. Voted for Stevenson as opposed to Eisenhower. That's Adlai Stevenson and Dwight Eisenhower. That would sort of support, and what else we know about Wilbur would support that this is a critique of suburbia. And so there you go. Max or Allie, a thought on this Toad poem before we go to the phone call?
Sure. Well, I like to say that I never met a poem that wasn't also a meta poem, but I think we already covered the extent to which all poetry is meta poetry.
Right.
But I think the argument against this poem as being a meta poem in the sense that we've been using it as contained in that first line, a toad the power mower caught. What he's invoking there between the toad and this being mangled by this modern suburban engine of at once like keeping your lawns clean, but also it's become like really some kind of mechanized horror here, and that it's like mangling these animals, and there's no sense of anything really being mangled, right? All we get is the even lawn, really, in this poem that the lawnmower produces, and we don't actually get in the form anything that's been chewed up or really
clipped
damaged.
Of a leg, Max. Clipped of a leg. That's about as clean as you can get.
That's much too clean, especially once in that first line we're just in that nightmarish scene, or we should be, and then we're instantly brought out of it and brought into this strange satiric, maybe quasi-satiric world.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right, thank you.